The creative power of the mutation selection mechanism as to produce all this genetic information.
Indeed.
What is the most powerful demonstration, in your opinion, that the Darwinian mechanism of natural selection has this great creative power?
Well, I would give you, you asked me for the most powerful one, and I will give you two. The first one that I will give you are the repeated observations of random mutation and natural selection, as you like to call them in your own terms, producing new species. And I can give you several examples of new species that have emerged within human observation. The best example that I can give you is a butterfly, a genus of butterfly known as Hedylipta. Hedylipta is a genus of butterfly that feeds on various plants. It's endemic to the Hawaiian Islands, which means it's only found there. And there turn out to be two species of Hedylipta with mouth parts that only allow them to feed on bananas. Now, why is that significant? It is significant because bananas are not native to the Hawaiian Islands. They were introduced about 1,000 years ago by the Polynesians. We know this from the written records of the Hawaiian Kingdom. And what that means is that by mutation and natural selection, these two species have emerged on the Hawaiian Islands within the last 1,000 years. And I think that's a very good case in point. And I'll give you another one if you would indulge me, but I figure you only asked for one. Want another?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, here's another. In the November 7th or November 14th issue of Science magazine, a number of investigators wanted to test the Darwinian hypothesis that you folks say is never tested. And the way in which they did this was to take the receptor protein for the human growth hormone. It's a receptor to which the human growth hormone fits in precisely, and they did a terrible genetic disservice. They mutated, they cut out an essential amino acid right in the middle of the receptor called tryptophan. With that gone, just like that mousetrap, it wouldn't have been expected to work. They then allowed a natural selection process to take place to see whether the cells, under their own observation, could mutate the receptor gene sufficiently to bind the receptor. And after 7 generations, lo and behold, there it was. And it illustrates beautifully the ability of natural selection to respond to mutations and proteins to co-evolve.
Mr. Behe?
I'd like to ask a different question. I do not find that result impressive, but we can talk about that later.
When you say you don't find it impressive, that's what Richard Dawkins calls the argument from personal incredulity.
But you realize
which is my evidence. My evidence against evolution is that I don't believe it.
Well, it's because of course, what it has to do. It has to create this immense amount of genetic information, much more complex than any.
Phillip,
and without recording it in the fossil record.
Right.
That's
you know
why
what,
it's
Phil?
not impressive.
I just gave you 2 examples, and that's still not enough.
May I ask another question related to Haeckel's embryos?
Oh, absolutely.
You not only showed these embryos in your book, but like other people, you said that things should be that way. You said in your book, mutations that affect early stage of development are likely to be lethal or deadly, and that mutations that cause less drastic changes would occur at later stages. Again, you're not alone in this. Bruce Alberts, who wrote Molecular Biology of the Cell, says much the same thing. Now we know that is not the case, and that early embryos can in fact change. Because you and Bruce Alberts, the president of the National Academy of Sciences...
Is there a question?
Yes, here it is. Because you two did not, because you thought Darwinism would produce this result, which is now shown to be fraudulent, is it safe to say that no scientist in the world understands how Darwinism could affect embryology?
Oh, absolutely not. May I answer even though we're out of time?
Very briefly.
Okay, very brief answer is, you read a quote and you pretended it meant something else. The quote that you read was, mutations in the early stage are less likely to survive, not impossible, and then you pretended to say that it meant that they couldn't survive. The fact that something is less likely, the fact that something is less likely, the fact that something, I'm answering, the fact that something is less likely does not rule it out. I agree with that, Alberts would agree with that, and I think everyone in the audience would agree with it too.
Professor
Thank
Miller.
you.
Mr. Buckley will now submit the questioning for the opposition team.
Let me kick off, Mr. Buckley. I guess my basic question is, why are you on that side rather than ours? I mean, are your objections religious? Are you against evolution? Are you against natural selection? Are your objections religious? Are they social, or what?
Well, I object to the way in which your confederates will leave you out of it as a matter of politesse, conduct themselves. They conduct themselves by simply assuming that people who argue the contrary or naifs or ignorant. It seems to be manifestly they are not. But my objection to your position is its ideological fixity. What you're speaking from is a dogmatic position from which everything else derives as one would expect. Right?
I can't help feeling that Seton Hall University speaking from a dogmatic position is not necessarily a fault.
Well, no, that's quite correct. If you could give us a progenitor more conclusive than Darwin, we might accept his dogmas. The notion that all dogmas are equal is what?
False.
Is well, it's at least false, but it's also it's also a disguise, really, for unmethodical thought, I would guess. But go ahead. What line are you pursuing?
Well, basically, I'm trying to understand why it is that you're against evolution. I mean, I could well understand. Is it because Richard Dawkins has linked evolution with atheism? Is it because some evolutionists have been socialists? Why? Because if it is, we'll give you a list that you'd like.
No, let's not be silly. For scientific materialists, the materialism comes first, the science comes thereafter. So my quarrel, and that of most of my colleagues, is with the extent to which you seek to imperialize over the entire question to the point of opposing a creationist thought in scientific and departments within the schools. This seems to be quite unnecessary in order to advance your own postulates.
Ms. Scott.
Is it necessary to invoke the hand of the Almighty in something like understanding cell division or understanding an internal combustion engine? No, if not, why is it necessary in understanding the history of life?
It is so frustrating to say something, then have to say it again. I said in my opening statement, the second sentence, was that we don't demand that you acknowledge creation and displace evolution. We demand that you acknowledge creation as an alternative explanation, one which we find more plausible. Now, this is as far as I am ready to go in this exchange. I am a practicing Catholic. Under the circumstances, have made certain commitments, but none of what I have said yet derives exclusively from that position. Mr. Berlinski is himself not a believer, and he's certainly eloquent in his dissent from your position.
I think well, go ahead, Ken.
Let me ask a question along those lines, because you bring up your faith, and I have to tell you that over the weekend, looking for a weakness, I read Nearer My God, your recent book, which I much admired. I thought it was a marvelous explanation of the faith that you and I share. And I want to read a quotation to you, and as everyone in the audience will know, I came tonight with the hope to be remembered as the guy with the placards. And the quotation is an important one. New knowledge has led to the recognition of more than a hypothesis in the theory of evolution. It is indeed remarkable that this theory has been progressively accepted by researchers following a series of discoveries in various fields of knowledge. The convergence, neither sought nor fabricated, the results of work that was conducted independently, is in itself a significant argument in favor of this theory. Would you care to speculate who said that, sir?
Well, the answer is I have no quarrel with it. Within 10 years after Darwin died, they were able to document to a point that he hadn't in the 20 years since he had visited Galapagos, a certain phenomena. I have no quarrel with those phenomena, but I think it's correct to classify them as microevolutionary, not macroevolutionary.
Well, in that point, I think you're in disagreement with Pope John Paul II, who made that statement.
No, wait a minute. Pope John Paul II said that he could not countenance any explanation which sought to account for the forces of living matter other than as mere epiphenomena of the matter, and are therefore incomparable incompatible